Welcome to World Prism. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The story begins on a crisp October evening in 2025 as millions of North Americans tuned in to watch the high-stakes baseball playoffs. In living rooms, sports bars, and bustling city centers, the excitement was palpable. But amid the cheers and tension of the game, a single television ad would set off a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. During a commercial break, viewers in Ontario were greeted by a striking ad. It featured archival footage of Ronald Reagan, the former US president, passionately warning against the dangers of trade wars. The message was clear, but the context was unmistakable. A pointed reminder to their southern neighbors about the perils of economic conflict. The ad was subtle, yet its intent was sharp, and it quickly became the talk of the town, sparking debates in cafes and offices across the province. In Washington, however, the reaction was anything but subtle. Former President Donald Trump, known for his quick temper and strong opinions, happened to catch the ad while watching the game. To him, it wasn't just a clever piece of political messaging, it was a direct affront, a public challenge to his legacy and his policies. Within hours, Trump took to social media, denouncing the ad and accusing Canada of disrespect. The next morning, he called an emergency press conference, announcing the immediate suspension of ongoing trade negotiations. He didn't stop there. Trump threatened to impose an additional 10% tariff on all Canadian goods entering the United States, bringing the total tariff rate to a staggering 45%. The announcement sent shockwaves through political and economic circles on both sides of the border. The impact was immediate and severe. Factories in both countries braced for layoffs, as supply chains were thrown into chaos. Stock markets tumbled, with investors fearing a prolonged trade war. In grocery stores, shoppers noticed prices creeping higher almost overnight, as the cost of imported goods soared. The livelihoods of thousands hung in the balance, and uncertainty gripped communities from Toronto to Detroit. The world's longest undefended border, once a symbol of friendship and cooperation, suddenly felt fraught with tension. Border crossings that had always been routine now seemed uncertain as officials on both sides prepared for the possibility of further escalation. Diplomats scrambled to contain the fallout, holding emergency meetings and watching the infamous TV spot on repeat, trying to decipher its full implications. What had started as a diplomatic nudge, a clever, if provocative, commercial, had rapidly spiraled into a full-blown international crisis. Now, Canada faced a difficult choice. Should they respond with strong words and risk further escalation, or seek a more strategic, measured approach to defuse the situation? The eyes of the nation turned to Ottawa, waiting for a sign of how their leaders would navigate this unexpected storm. Around the globe, news outlets broke into regular programming to cover the unfolding drama. People from London to Tokyo watched anxiously, wondering if this neighborly spat would spiral into something much bigger, or if cooler heads would ultimately prevail. Canada's response was a lesson in restraint. Prime Minister Mark Carney, known for his calm, refused to escalate. He simply stated Canada was ready to resume talks anytime, framing his country as the reasonable party. Carney reminded the world that a deal was close, before the blow-up, highlighting the overreaction. At a summit in South Korea, Carney and Trump were photographed chatting amicably, an image that spoke louder than any press release. Canada's message, "We won't be rattled or bullied." This Carney doctrine contrasted sharply with the chaos from Washington. Sometimes the most powerful response is calm silence. While Canada kept its cool, quietly watching events unfold from across the border, the political temperature in Washington was rising fast. The Canadian government, known for its measured diplomacy, refrained from escalating tensions, even as the US political scene grew more turbulent. In a rare display of unity, the US Senate came together, bridging the deep partisan divide that so often defines American politics. Senators from both parties, usually at odds, found common ground in their opposition to the new tariffs. On October 29, 2025, the Senate held a dramatic vote. The chamber was tense as senators cast their ballots, ultimately voting 50-46 to block President Trump's proposed tariffs on Canadian goods. The close margin reflected the high stakes and the deep divisions within the chamber. Four prominent Republicans, Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul, broke ranks with their party, joining Democrats in a striking show of bipartisanship. Their decision sent shockwaves through the Capitol, highlighting growing unease within Republican ranks about the direction of U.S. trade policy. In a pointed speech, McConnell invoked the legacy of Ronald Reagan, quoting the former president's famous warning against the dangers of trade wars. By turning Reagan's words back on Trump, McConnell underscored the deep roots of America's free trade tradition and challenged the current administration's approach. Senator Collins argued passionately that targeting Canada would ultimately backfire, harming not just Canadian businesses, but American workers as well. She pointed to the interconnectedness of the two economies, warning that tariffs could threaten jobs in U.S. factories and disrupt vital supply chains. Despite the Senate's bold move, the vote was largely symbolic. In the House of Representatives, Republican leaders refused to allow binding action, effectively blocking any immediate change in policy. The legislative standoff underscored the limits of congressional power in the face of executive authority. Still, the Senate's rebuke was impossible to ignore. Senators on both sides of the aisle expressed growing discomfort with what they saw as Trump's unpredictable and often chaotic approach to trade. The mood in the chamber was one of unease, as lawmakers grappled with the potential consequences for the U.S. economy and its global relationships. The old free trade consensus, forged over decades through agreements like NAFTA, was showing signs of life. Economists and lawmakers alike rallied to defend the principles of open markets and international cooperation, pushing back against the rising tide of protectionism. In the end, Congress was sending a clear message, not just to the White House but to the world. Enough with the chaos, they declared. America's commitment to its allies and to stable, predictable trade policy would not be so easily undone. The economic fallout in Canada was immediate and real. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem warned that U.S. protectionism was weakening Canada's economy. Tariffs acted as a tax, raising costs for businesses and consumers, fueling inflation. Productivity and competitiveness suffered as companies scrambled for new suppliers. Macklem stressed that monetary policy couldn't fix the deep damage caused by trade wars. The only real solution: remove the tariffs. For Canadian businesses, the uncertainty was paralyzing. The pain was no longer theoretical. It was happening now. The dispute between the United States and Canada was far from an isolated incident. It was just one fragment of a much larger, chaotic puzzle that defined President Trump's approach to global trade. As tensions simmered between these two close neighbors, the world watched with growing concern, wondering how this rift would ripple across international markets and alliances. The Canada spat was emblematic of a broader uncertainty that had taken hold, not just in North America, but around the globe. While the U.S. was threatening tariffs and tough talk with Canada, it was simultaneously negotiating and striking deals with other major economies like China, South Korea, and Japan. These parallel negotiations sent mixed signals to both allies and rivals, making it difficult for anyone to predict America's next move. The administration's unpredictable tactics left many countries scrambling to protect their own interests. In a high-profile meeting, President Trump and China's Xi Jinping agreed to a temporary one-year truce. This agreement included lowering certain tariffs and boosting U.S. agricultural exports, especially soybeans, which had been hit hard by the trade war. For American farmers, this was a much-needed lifeline, but for global markets, it was just another twist in an ongoing saga of uncertainty. Meanwhile, in Washington, Congress was taking its own steps to ease tensions. Lawmakers, from both parties, moved to end harsh tariffs on Brazilian goods, signaling a rare moment of bipartisan agreement. This move reflected a growing fatigue with the endless cycle of trade wars and a desire to restore some stability to international commerce. Ironically, the U.S. often appeared friendlier to its traditional rivals than to its closest allies. This approach left many world leaders and diplomats scratching their heads, unsure of where America truly stood. The shifting alliances and unpredictable policies created confusion and frustration, not just in Canada, but across Europe and beyond. Allies around the world began to openly question whether there was a coherent strategy behind America's actions, or if decisions were being made on impulse. International summits became arenas for speculation, as leaders tried to decipher the logic, or lack thereof, behind U.S. trade policy. Even within the United States, the Senate's actions made it clear that concern was not limited to the Canada dispute. Lawmakers worried about the broader direction of America's trade relationships and the long-term impact on the country's global standing. In this climate of uncertainty, the global landscape became more unpredictable than ever before. Markets fluctuated, alliances shifted, and the world waited to see what the next chapter in this unfolding trade drama would bring. The tariff fight exposed a deep rift in the Republican Party. For decades, the GOP championed free trade. Trump's protectionism flipped that script. The Senate vote revealed a split between traditional conservatives and economic nationalists. McConnell's Reagan quote was a call to reclaim the party's old identity. Senators from export-heavy states faced pressure from both local economies and party leadership. The House's power to block votes showed the nationalist wing still held sway. But repeated Senate defiance hinted at a brewing rebellion. The GOP's future, free trade or protectionism, was now an open question. October 2025 revealed a stark contrast between U.S. volatility and Canadian steadiness. Carney's calm approach won international support and even encouraged U.S. bipartisanship. But Canada's strategy remained reactive, not proactive. For the U.S., Senate pushback signaled a possible shift away from trade wars. The outcome depends on which Republican faction prevails. The Carney-Trump summit photo offered hope that personal diplomacy could bridge divides. Canada's quiet strength may yet inspire a return to pragmatic partnership. The world waits to see if reason can triumph over rhetoric.